Hello, this is Craig from bitsbox.co.uk. In this video I'm going to be painting an Aberrant from the Genestealer Cult. So these guys are only available at the moment in the Deathwatch Overkill box set, but they're really cool miniatures, and out of all the Genestealer Cult models, they're probably my favourite out of the infantry at least. So yeah, really cool. I thought I'd get around to painting mine up and I'll show you a little video on how I do them. So we're going to begin by painting the skin, and for that I'm going to take some Rakaf flesh. So it's slightly thinned down as always. Now I'm just going to apply it to all the skin areas, all over the miniature. There's quite a lot on these, as they have no armour on their torso. So just work your way around the model, paint them all the skin areas. And I'm probably going to give them a couple of thin coats just for a nice smooth coverage. So with that base coat of the skin now completely dry, we're going to add a shade, and we're going to take some Druchii Violet. So it's a slightly unusual shade to use for skin normally, well, that's not too bad. On skin sometimes it has its uses, but for this we're going to apply it like really heavily, so a lot different than how I'd usually use on skin, but we want this guy to sort of have a nice purple tint to his skin, so I'm really just going to apply it like on. Obviously we don't want it to build up too much, but at the same time we really want to give this skin a nice sort of purple tint to it. So just apply it all the way around the miniature on all the skin areas, and then be back for the next step. Okay, with that shade wash now dry, that's given us a really nice sort of muted purple skin tone. So we're going to come back in with the Druchii Violet, and we're going to apply it again, but this time just over certain areas. So if you've seen the Aberrant miniatures, if you've seen any painted up, sometimes they have a bit more sort of purple in some areas, so especially around where some of the armour parts are. So I'm just going to apply just another layer just around this arm here. I'm also going to apply it to the hands, for far left and right hands, as they have the armour on them. So the ones with like the armour, sort of the Tyranid armour plates, are the ones that are sort of mutated a bit further towards the Genestealer, so this is why these areas are going to be sort of more purple, and same with like his clawed foot as well. And you can do any areas you want really, but I'm just going to do these ones, and I'm just going to do this arm also. So that will make these areas slightly darker, and then when it comes to highlight them, we will highlight them slightly different to the rest of the skin also. You can also, when it dries, you can give another coat even further towards where it's gone purple, and this will give you a nice sort of little bit of transition if you wish. So I'll let this dry, and then we'll come back in for the highlights. Okay, so the wash is now completely dried. As you can see, it's slightly darker in these areas now, which is what we want. So next, I'm going to just re-establish some of that Rakaf flesh, just a little bit. This will be our first highlight for the flesh. I'm not going to put this highlight on these darker purple areas, as we'll have a more sort of purplish highlight for them. So I'm just going to come back in just with the Rakaf flesh, but this time I'm going to water it down ever so slightly. Oh, excuse me. If you watched the last video for the Dark Elf, you know that I always like to thin paint down quite a bit when it comes to painting skin areas. So it's just a case of just hitting all the raised areas with this Ragnarok flesh. It looks quite a stark difference as it goes on, but as it dries it will be much lighter, especially as we've thinned it down, and that's what we want. So I'm just going to work around all the muscles, hitting all the raised areas and leaving the purple in the recesses. So once I've done that, I'll be back. Okay, so I've worked around the miniature, applying that first highlight. So we're now going to apply the first highlight to the darker purple areas. Now I'm going to come back in with the Ragnarok flesh, but we're also going to add a little bit of the colour lilac to it. So this will give it a nice purple look to it. Again, I'm just going to thin it down ever so slightly, just so it will flow nicely. So that's roughly 1:1 consistency, and it brings out this sort of light lilac-y colour. Now don't worry if it, where it meets the regular skin, if it looks like it's just jumping between two colours. I do plan on adding a glaze over these later to try and bring two areas together. So I just work around these darker purple areas. So I have the hands here at the front. I'll try and get my camera shot, sorry. Of course we have the arms here as well. So you might need a couple of thin coats to get a nice coverage of this colour. But once you've done that, we can go in with just a further highlight on the rest of the skin. So now I just want to add just a further highlight to these regular skin areas. And for that I'm going to mix Ragnarok flesh with some pallid witch flesh. Again, this will probably be roughly a 1:1 mix, just so you lighten up that Ragnarok flesh. And I just want to hit just sort of the more raised areas now. So for example, just we can go along here and all the other raised areas of the muscles. Again, I'm keeping it quite thin. Oh, I've got to set that. And you sort of follow the muscles like that. And of course we have the face as well, and there's lots of areas on the face we can focus on, such as around the eyes, as well as the jaw, and what sort of remains of his ears. And there's plenty of muscles on the back that I'm going to go through as well, and just sort of line them like that. So I'll just work around the model and then we'll be back, and I think I'll add a glaze to these transitions next. So we've added in these extra highlights. And of course you could even go one step further and with just pure pallid witch flesh if you wish, and you may also wish to highlight these areas further, but I'm quite happy with them how they are. I even noticed I made a bit of a mess up on the hand there, which I'm going to fix with some Druchii Violet in a minute, because we are now going to take some Druchii Violet. So first just add a little bit of shade to that hand where I need to neaten that up. Get some on the brush. Then we're going to thin it down with some water to sort of a glaze consistency. So about 50-50 with water. It's fine. It's preferable to use the main medium, but for a small amount that I need, I think water should be fine. And we're going to apply it just around this area. just where we're getting transitions between the two colours. That will help marry them, just marry them in a little bit. So I'm actually going to do it. Hold on. How many layers you do is completely your choice. You may wish to do 2 or 3. I probably will as well. I'm going to put some down on this arm here. So just try and apply it sort of thinly and evenly over the whole area. It won't make a massive difference after 1 coat, but after sort of 2 or 3 you'll see that'll build up a really nice effect between the 2 areas of the skin. With them glazes now dry, that's giving us a nice sort of transition going between the purple and the Raka flesh coloured skin. You can do even more glazes if you wanted to build up a better transition, but I think for just sort of a tabletop standard we're going for, that's good enough for me. So next up was to paint all these little sort of armour parts here. Now of course you can paint them any way you want, and if you have an existing Tyranid army you could paint them to match that. So I am going to paint them using Cantor Blue to start with as our base coat. Now if you've watched the video of how I painted the Patriarch model from this set, you'll notice that I'm going to paint these in a very similar fashion to that. So just start by giving them a nice base coat of a Cantor Blue. It covers pretty well over the grey primer. However, I will still apply 2 thin coats to give us a nice solid colour. Next I'm going to add a shade wash to these to darken them down. So I'm going to use some Nuln Oil. So I'm going to thin it down just a little bit, but not too much. So as well as shading all the recessed areas, this will just darken down that Cantor Blue just ever so slightly. Which is sort of what we're going for. So just apply the Nuln Oil and then leave it to dry, and we can start highlights. Okay, so now that that blue's been darkened, I want to come back in with the Cantor Blue. This time, instead of applying it all over the blue areas, I'm just going to leave the darker blue where the wash is settled, just in the recesses, and we're just going to work our way around the edges like so. So just work around the rest of the blue areas, and again I'm just leaving the darker shade just in the recesses. So next up I'm going to take some Altdorf Guard Blue, and this is going to be for our highlight. So I'm just going to add an edge highlight to all these blue areas. So just working around in these sort of areas here. I thinned it down just with a little bit of water, just so we don't have such a stark looking line once it dries. I'm going to work our way around the centre area as well. So once I've worked this highlight in around these areas, that blue will be complete, and we can move on to the pink areas in the middle. Okay, so for the pink areas I'm going to take some pink horror. So this will be for the areas, sort of these areas here on his arms, and I'm also going to paint the tongue in exactly the same way. So just be very careful, just painting around blue areas, make sure you don't get any on them. I've thinned it down slightly just for a better flow, it's probably a bit too runny there, and I'll do a couple of thin coats. Okay, so next up I'm going to add a shade to the pink areas, and I will also point out there's a couple of scars on his back that I've decided to paint in the pink as well. So for a shade I'm going to take some Carabag Crimson. So I really need a tiny little bit of this just to go on these sections here. I'll just add Just a bit of shade to them. And we have one round the back as well. Okay, if you want, you can also add just a little bit onto the tongue. So next up, I'm going to paint the metal areas. So that'll include most of his weapon. He has a little bit of armour just on his front there, and some chain around his neck. These will all be painted exactly the same way, and I'll be starting with lead belcher. So I'll start with the large area here on the hammer. So just a case, as always, just applying a nice thin coat of this colour, and lead belcher goes over this grey primer quite well, but in some areas I'll apply just an extra coat so we have a nice smooth finish. Now I'm going to paint all this weapon apart from just these areas here, which we'll be doing in a different colour, and with this model you just need to be careful just going in this area here, as it's a bit tricky to get to. So I'll just paint the metal areas and then we'll come back and shade them. So next up we'll add some shading to these areas, and we will take some Nuln oil. So I'm just going to apply it straight out of the pot, just on all these metal areas. That'll give a nice shade to all the recess areas, and then we can come back in and highlight them in the next step. Next we're going to add a highlight, and we're going to use Runefang Steel. So I'm going to apply this sort of as an edge highlight. So on the hammer, just run along this area here. I've thinned it down so that won't look quite as stark as this once it dries. And for the chains, I'll just move the camera slightly. There we go. Just pick out just each individual link on the chains. And once this is done, the metal areas will be complete, and we'll move on to the cloth. So of course, with the cloth you can do it any colour you want, and ideally colour to match the rest of your army. But in this example, I'm going to sort of go with the orangey scheme that you see in the codex. So I'm going to take some Jokero orange, or Jokero orange, however you pronounce it. And I'm just going to apply it over all the cloth areas on this miniature. And as always, I'll just apply 2 thin coats for a nice even finish. So next we're going to apply a shade wash to these areas, and I'm going to take some Carabao Crimson once again. This time I am going to thin it out, sort of 50-50, just with water. Of course you can use Lemaine medium also. It's quite a strong colour on the orange, but once you water it down it does give a nice subtle shadow. So you just want to try and avoid it pooling up too much. Just a little bit on the leg there. So I'm just applying it all over his clothes, like so. So now we can add a highlight to the clothes, and I'm going to take some Fire Dragon Bright, and I'm going to thin it down also, as it's a lot brighter than the base coat, so we don't want it to be too stark once it goes on. And again, as normal, I'm just going to apply it sort of more as an edge highlight, hitting the raised areas so we can go along the waistline, like so. It might be a bit hard to see on camera, it's quite thin, so it won't look quite subtle, but that'll just add a nice little highlight to these clothing areas. I'll go around, just go around the leg here, also go there like that, and then once this highlight has been applied, the clothes will be complete and we're almost finished. Okay, so there's only 2 more details left to paint on the miniature. They are his claws and nails, as well as his teeth. And we also have just a little shaft of his weapon there. So we're going to start with the claws and that, and I'm going to base coat them all with Baneblade Brown. So I'm going to do just a very simple paint scheme on all these areas, starting with the Baneblade Brown. So we have like the claws on his hands and also his feet, and we can pick out all his little fingernails. I'm not so worried about the teeth at this stage. I'll probably just use our highlight colour on them, but of course you can base coat them in Baneblade Brown if you so wish. Okay, so next I'm going to highlight these areas, and I'm going to take some Screaming Skull. So I've thinned it out just slightly because we need it to flow quite nicely for this stage, and I'm using the thin brush as well. And we're essentially just going to run a few lines just from the tips of the claws, sort of going just about sort of halfway up. So it's a very simple way just to paint the claws. I'm not going for anything too fancy for these. I'm also going to pick out the toenails just on the tips as well. And then using this colour, I'm also going to carefully try and pick out the teeth, and I may have to do these off camera just for ease, but just very carefully just pick them out. Like so. So lastly we just have a little bit on his weapon. So you can paint this any colour you want. Brown's normally quite good, or you can do any other colour. I'm actually going to take some Screamer Pink. Now I've painted a lot of these sort of bindings on weapons in Screamer Pink a lot recently. I think it's quite a nice colour for these areas. So, as always, we just carefully apply base coat. So there's not a great deal of this colour on this miniature. So I'll just give that plenty of time to dry before we come in with the highlight. Lastly, we can highlight this area using some Emperor's Children. So when it comes to highlighting this area, you can sort of follow the triangles, and I like to just go along 2 edges of them, just in like a little triangle shape, sort of like so, and then you can do that just on all of them. And then once you've done that, the miniature will be complete. Okay, and here is the finished Aberrant miniature. So I'm really happy with how he turned out. Just a final note, I did paint his eye in Uriel yellow just off camera, so if you're feeling adventurous, then you can do that with your one also. So yeah, I really love the Aberrant miniatures. They are my favourite miniatures in the Genestealer Cult range, and I've been wanting to do this video for quite some time now. I think it was requested on our page quite a while back. I wasn't even 100% sure how I was going to do the skin before I started this tutorial, but I'm really happy how it came out. I want to have sort of like a little sort of purple transition going into a more sort of paler, purpley type of flesh, and it's come out really good, I think. I hope you guys have also enjoyed the tutorial, and for any of you guys who have followed along or have your own Genestealer Cult units to paint. I hope this tutorial has been very helpful for you guys. Of course, I'm always happy for suggestions, so if you want to see any type of miniature painted or any techniques, etc., please feel free to leave a comment. So all that's left to say is, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and you can also subscribe to our channel if you so wish to. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again in the next video.